From a self-proclaimed failure in his 20s to a millennial mapper, he's all grown up. And as Seth Godin calls him, he's a wiser, funnier older brother, dispensing wisdom in his books and talks. Today, you can find him writing about moonwalking bears, thinking in a lavender bubble bath, playing the Arcade Fire on repeat, encouraging all of us to be awkward or bored, or maybe just paying attention in a garden somewhere in Colorado. Ladies and gentlemen, author of his most recent and life-changing book, Listen to Your Day, Mr. Paul Angone. Don't call him Tony Angone. It's Paul Angone, everybody. Paul, welcome, brother.
Hey, thank you. You can call me Tony Angone, but then I got to wear more chains and more chest hair. But my middle name is Tony, so I wanted to be a true Italian. Hey, yo, what's the matter you? Tony Angone.
You speak that fluently. I can tell. I love it.
That's being raised by a Louis Angone. That's what will happen to you. So
that'll do it. I wish I had Louis Angone as my dad. That's strong.
You can have him. He's still around. There's more enough of Lou to go around. So
that's beautiful, man. It's so good to hang with you. We were talking a little bit beforehand, and we just immediately you find those kindred spirits, and I think we've latched on here. So. Dude, I'm really excited to talk about your new book, and I'm interested in this transition because you were very focused on, again, I said in the intro, you talked about you were a failure in your 20s, and so then you just dug in on millennials. Tell me about that transition away, because your book's before 101 questions you need to ask in your 20s, 101 secrets for your 20s. All grown up, searching for self-faith and a freaking job. So you were so focused, but you've pivoted a little bit here with this new book to a little bit more of a broader audience and something that I really relate to. But I'm curious what that transition has been like.
Yeah, my first books, 101 Secrets for Your 20s, all those books were basically because I felt like such a failure in my 20s, and it was such a hard decade of my life. You think you're going to go do all these big things, make a difference, change the world, make a ton of money, get married, whatever that dream is. And then it's like those expectations just go up in flames at some point in your 20s for a lot of us. Yeah. And so through that failure and that questioning, I started realizing, hey, I'm not alone in this. And there's something bigger going on here. So that's why I started really honing in on, because I just feel like, man, you're setting the course of your life. Yeah. And you can go one of two ways. And it's hard to, you talk to the 60 somethings that are like, man, I wish I would have asked myself the harder questions earlier on instead of just picking this path that I didn't want to go down. So that's why I was so passionate about that topic and why I've written so extensively about it. So now with this new book, Listen to Your Day, The Life-Changing Practice of Paying Attention, same source of motivation of, man, I feel like I'm just an utter failure right now at this. I just felt like I'm missing the most important parts of my life, and that's why I connected so well with what you guys are about. When I watch you guys' video, like I told you, I'm like, oh my gosh, these are my guys. Yeah. Because it was that same feeling of, my kids and my relationships, what I find meaningful and valuable. Yeah. And yet I'm spending so much time and attention on things that just don't add any value, that are not worthy of my time and attention. I have to change that. So that's where I did this deep dive again, researching, studying, writing, thinking about how do I change habits and practices in my life to start focusing in on what's important again.
Dude, it's so good. I've in my notes and maybe we'll hit on it later, is that even as a company, we found that it's so important to seek out those opportunities for failure, because that's when you learn. Those are the teachers. And so just knowing that this is, because you read this book and it is from a place, you read it is from a place of authority, and that it's very well researched, but it's also from a place of humility and vulnerability for you, saying like, I've just missed these moments too. And what a greater thing to not look back with shame, but then look forward to, okay, how do I make this better? Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And I often, one of my lines I'm always saying is that the possibility for greatness and embarrassment both exist in the same space. Wow. So you can't do anything great in this world if you're not willing to be completely embarrassed in the process. That's so true. And social media kind of, there's a lot of fear of that. I don't want to look awkward. I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want to look like a failure. If I can't even post this because what if I don't get enough likes? All those feelings. So as an author, and you're probably the same, Joe, you're just leading with that sense of authenticity, vulnerability, saying, hey, I'm in this too. Maybe I'm just a couple steps ahead because I've just been focusing in on this. Yeah. But hey, I'm not perfect, and I think and this is a whole leadership talk, this is a totally different thing,
Yeah,
but I think
right.
that's where that leadership and that connection happens. We're all struggling, but too many of us are struggling to make it appear like we're not struggling.
Ooh, that's good.
And genuine connection happens in the shared struggle.
Yeah.
So all of us have to be willing to say, hey, you have to be willing to go first.
Yeah.
And as leaders, as parents or whatever, you have to be willing to say something like, I've messed up, and I try to do that. I've always tried to do that in all my books, to be kind of that older brother, like Seth Godin. That was a great endorsement from Seth Godin, who I looked up to. But I love that, being the kind of that older brother who's just a little wiser, a little funnier, a little snarkier. But anyway.
I've a bit of maybe a sideways question on the 20s thing, where you said, we talked about how you had all these ambitions for, the greatness and all the great things you can do. Do you think any of that is attributed to growing up in the church? I grew up in the church as well. And then you're told, everybody says Jeremiah 29:11 again and again and again. Do you think any of that? And then you're just like, oh, I have a specific purpose and calling. And then all of a sudden when you're met with, oh, but you got to start at the bottom. You have to start as an analyst. You got to start as, bringing coffee to people. Do you think any of that is attributed to growing up in the church?
Yeah, totally. I think there's just this whole other weight to it, in the sense of, you got to be successful financially, or you got, you're going to have a family, get a house, you got to do all those things still.
Yeah.
But also go change the world.
Yeah.
And not that, non-believers or people that didn't grow up in the church don't have these feelings of, I want to make an impact.
Sure.
But I think that's definitely ingrained in that culture. So yeah, I've had the opportunity now to speak at a lot of colleges, both, secular schools or more faith-driven schools. And definitely in those faith-driven schools, I have a lot more kids coming up to me afterwards and saying, thank you. I've been so anxious. I've been so worried. I don't think I'm going to live up to anything that I'm supposed to, and it's my constant reminder for young people, or for all of us, that having these dreams and goals, these ambitions, that's great. Being optimistic, wanting to go do these big things, I think is awesome. Yeah. It's the timeline for how quickly you think you're going to see some fruit from this choice. That becomes the problem. And especially in our culture where everything's at our fingertips and instant. So I'm constantly reminding, 20 something, especially, in your 20s, it's more about setting the table than enjoying the feast.
I like it.
You got to set it right, you know, so that you're not a one-hit wonder where success actually crushes you. And so in my case, and we're going all over the place here, but I felt like God really protected me by not giving me much visible success in my 20s, because it would have crushed me. I didn't have the skill set to carry it, but I also didn't have the character to carry the weight of any success. I thought I did, but I think God was like, no, you gotta go. I gotta train you, and if you're going to have a big calling in life, the training's got to be as equally as intense and difficult and big. Yeah. And so I think we miss that part of the story. Right. Yeah. We're just like yada, yada, yada. And then I had the Fortune 500 company, or I had the best-selling book,
Yeah, exactly. I really like that. And it goes to it's a segue into this book, which is it begins small. It begins, we all have these grand ambitions, but it does begin small, and listen to your day, which, by the way, I keep singing in my mind, listen to your heart. But I'm saying, listen to your day. Yeah. Which I love. So I'm keep singing that. But the overwhelming feeling I got reading this book, and I want to go into it, is how much is at stake here. And you do put a lot of weight behind it, I think, in a very healthy way and very truth-telling way. But as you knew it was important to you, but as you wrote it and as you dug into it, did you get this even more sense of weight on it, of how much is at stake?
Yeah, I mean, probably similar to you guys, where it's that passion that just keeps growing and growing. Yeah. Like, man, this is how is everybody not talking about this? And that's usually a sign that you're onto something that is important to you, where it's like, man, how is everybody not thinking about this and focusing on how important this is, and our attention and where we're paying our attention, I think, is one of the key topics and the thing that we have to talk about in today's world. Because, as I say in the book, and I'm not trying to over dramatize things, but I say there's a battle for our attention. There's a war going on for our attention. And I don't think that's far reaching to say, because our attention is money, and it's literally in the phrase, pay attention. Right. So I even put that in the context of money. You're making transactions with everything you're paying attention to. You're making a transaction, and you're paying that, whether it's an app, a website, or whatever, or a relationship.
Yeah.
You're investing in that. So it's even thinking about, do I want to be investing in the things that I'm paying the most attention to? Also, do I want to be in debt through my attention to TikTok? Do I want to be in debt to TikTok? Do I want to be in debt to 45 minutes on Instagram stories? Like, do I want to be in debt to these things? Do these things have my emotional, spiritual, mental, physical well-being in mind? Or are they created just to be as maximally addicting as possible? And I have research in the book where one of the engineers that helped create Infinite Scroll, where you don't have to think anymore on social media; they just keep scrolling for you. So he called it behavioral cocaine, is what they were trying to create. So that's hyperbole. That's a scary statement, for somebody to say. We have thousands and thousands of very educated engineers that are working on creating behavioral cocaine. That's alarming. So I think we have to be as equally intentional with our attention, with this conversation, with how important this is, because what you pay attention to, you become. That is your life. And so that's why I was like, man, I got to get back to what is meaningful, what is good. I got to focus my mind on those kind of things, because I want to pay my attention to life-giving things. I want to make that compounding interest of my attention grow.
It's funny, as I was reading the intro in chapter 1, I came to the end of it, of both of those, and I thought I didn't feel like I needed someone to convince me that I needed to pay attention. But reading that, I thought, holy crap! I mean, you do a very good job of taking something we probably all would say, of course I need to pay attention to what's important, but you lay it out in such a way that it's a good reminder. It uncovers some new things, makes me realize that I'm not doing it. And then there are a couple things you said in chapter 1 that I like. You talk about the intentional choice to be an active participant in your day, and you name 3 things: the magical, the mundane, and the mechanical. Will you talk about those 3? I really like the concept of all 3 of those, that you're participating in different ways throughout your day: the magical, mundane, and the mechanical.
Yeah, I think most of our days feel a little bit of the 2, of the mechanical and the mundane.
Yeah.
We're just going through the motions. It's almost like driving the car, where you get to where you're going, you get to work, the same drive you've always been doing.
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't even remember the last 5 minutes, because I was just zoned out. I'm just solely in the mechanical and the mundane, kind of this robot just going through the motions. And yet, you're right. Every day is a gift, so I'm not trying to, over spiritualize or, but it's, there's so much richness waiting for us, and I call it, we talk about chance encounters. We had this chance encounter in our day. I call them not so chance encounters.
Yeah.
Like what are the odds that you're sitting next to that person in an airplane? I always think about that. Like, this is amazing. Like, that we're here in history. We both had the same schedule. We're here next to each other. Like, we couldn't have orchestrated this if we wanted to, probably. Yeah. And now we're next to each other. So, like, is this a not so chance encounter? Is this a gift? And I think we're given these gifts. So that's where that magic comes in. So that makes the mundane and the mechanical magical.
Yeah.
So we start paying attention at our day through a totally different lens. And we can start pulling out, like, all the blessings, all the insight, the revelation, the ideas that are coming at us. We cry out to God, like, please, God, give me clarity. And I feel like God's trying to give us that. And he's like, if you would just give me a moment to listen, to just hear, I put these things in front of you, but you're so focused on all these other distractions, you know? And so it does help transform I almost equate it. I remember, I'm getting long-winded, but I remember riding in my a Mazda Miata with my girlfriend in LA, and we're on the 405 freeway, which is what I say, that's where good moods go to die in LA, because it's a parking lot. You're there for an hour. I'm in a Mazda Miata, which is, it's like a tin can. Like, I can barely move. It's so small, and I'm there with my girlfriend, And I remember thinking, it was such a terrible feeling moment. You're just stuck. I remember thinking, man, I would not want to be anywhere else or here with anybody else but her.
Wow.
Like it transformed that moment into a magical moment.
Yeah.
And that's why she's now my wife of 15 years and 4 kids. Right.
Wow.
So it's again, that's what helps transform the mundane, the mechanical into to magic every day. It doesn't have to be the mountaintop to get the magic involved in your everyday.
But that story could have gone differently if you had not married her. I was curious. Your wife would
I probably wouldn't have used it as an illustration.
That's smart. Yeah, exactly.
And then the rabbit ran out of the hat, and we broke up 6 months later.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. It's funny. My son is about to turn 15, and my daughter is 13, and I've noticed lately that with this realization that, gosh, my son's in high school next year, my daughter will be in high school in 2 years. I have to start driving slower. So I've been not telling them, but just purposely driving slower in the mundane, because I know here's a moment that I have that they can't do anything but be a captive audience with me. And then trying to create the magical. So the other day I was taking them to school, and my son, I noticed he was on his phone. I was like, hey, let's all have a conversation, but we have to sing it the whole way to school, all 15 minutes. So the only thing, you had to sing it, and then you had to ask a question of somebody else at the end, then you had to ask it. So we sang the entire time, and my son took a second to warm up to it. My daughter was immediately in. But you're right. There's a mundane moment of we're driving to school and traffic's bad, and people in East Tennessee don't know how to drive very well, but you make the magical out of it, and and the opportunity does, to your point, that it exists at all moments for us.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. You say that we're dangerously close to losing the war for our attention, and the culprit and I'm not disagreeing with you in any way here, a lot of the book, the early parts of the book, are focused on our phones in our pockets.
Yeah.
Will you talk about that piece of discovery, and maybe even how that might differ from in the past? And people say, oh yeah, we had TVs 30 years ago, they thought that was going to, or 50 years ago, they thought that was going to take our attention away, or even newspapers before then, but this is different. So why is it that you spent so much time talking about our phones?
Sure. Yeah. I mentioned in the book another book called The Hidden Persuaders, which is a book written by Vance Packard, a very popular book. And he was talking about he was alarming the nation about, how advanced marketing and advertising is getting, how they're manipulating the privacy of our minds. And he was very concerned about this. And it was a best-selling book. Everybody became alarmed about it. But I found it interesting that this book was written in the 50s or early 60s is when this book came out.
Wow.
So that's why I talk about, especially the phone, because we all know, and we've seen the documentaries, we kind of understand it a little bit more now, how advanced this is getting. So we're not talking about madmen in an ad copy room, drinking whiskey and thinking of ways for you to buy cigarettes.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about very sophisticated AI algorithm systems that are totally catered to your brain, that is helping rewire the way your brain works and functions.
Yeah.
We're becoming Pavlov's dogs, except that our phone, we used to only answer our phone when it was ringing. Now we're answering our phone when it doesn't even make a sound.
Yeah. It's calling out to us all the time.
It's calling out to us all the time. And it's our reflex response. And that's where I'm getting to it. It's so much further a part of us that it's I call it our digital cigarette. It's us taking that hit constantly. But what's even more pervasive about this is that you at least had to go outside to take the cigarette break. Yeah. You used to have to take a break. It was almost an intentional choice in space.
Yeah. Right.
But now with the phone, you can just slowly pull it out on your couch. Life is still going out, but now you've escaped.
Yeah.
So I'm I call us as cultural escape artist is what we're starting to become. Where any dull, boring, uncomfortable down moment, I can just now, it's my reflex to escape into anything that ends up being nothing. And that's where it's what's alarming to me, So now we watch the television with the computer on our laps and then our phone in our hand, and then, our spouse is saying like, what just happened in the show or whatever. It's like, well, we can't even focus. So we can't even focus on what used to be our biggest distraction, you know?
Yeah, we're distracted by our distractions.
So that's what I always say. We used to live annoyed with our distractions. Now we're kind of living for our distractions.
Yeah.
And that's an alarming thing, I think, for all of us.
Yeah. One thing that I noticed, this is a big wake up call to me, and I've told the story a lot, and we talk about it in our failures and our shortcomings, what led us where we were. I feel like I remember one story with my son when he was young. We're reading a book at night, my arms around him. I'm holding my phone out to the side while we have one of those books that reads to you, and innocent as can be, 3-4 years old. He goes, "Hey Dad, this is my favorite." And I didn't think he noticed me looking at my phone aside. And he said, "Hey Dad, this is my favorite page. Will you do this page with me? Then you can look at your phone again." and I realized, among just this moment of my utter failure, was that my son was beginning to be conditioned to believe that he was the distraction, that my phone was the priority, and that he was the distraction. So it's almost like our distractions are, I love your line, we're being distracted by our distractions, but our distractions are flip-flopping. The things that were important are now our distractions, such as our kids. Yep. And you're right. And then when you talk about the weight behind it, there's the weight behind it, because using your cigarette analogy, they are cigarettes for ourselves. And what we're doing is we're blowing secondhand smoke all around those people that we love. And it's, when you put it in that way, it's, how can we not do something there? And
that's why in my book too, I have, many chapters just kind of focused on relationships.
Yeah.
Because that is such a big casualty of our attention if it's not properly placed, and that's another focus with our attention about being intentional, is that, all love starts with our attention, and it's either a proper application of our attention or it's not. Yeah. You really can't do the love languages, with the 5 love languages.
Yeah.
You can't do those if you're not paying attention. You're not going to see them. You're not going to be able to apply them.
Yeah.
And so every time, like you were saying, it's a great story, but every time that we're shifting our attention away from somebody that's meaningful to us, to our phone, to some distraction, we're telling them, hey, this is more important than you.
Yeah.
And it's such a blocker of authentic relationships. And, and it's like that, it's like that crack in your windshield that starts off very small, even in the context of marriage. I don't think marriages unravel because of one just giant thing out of nowhere, right? It's the crack that just keeps growing and growing. And I think it's part of it now is we've lost that sense of paying attention to each other. And life is already so busy. Yeah. Kids are already so noisy. I have 4 kids, so I talk about it like it's like you have 4 radio stations on in the house at max volume, all on different stations all the time. Like, that's enough noise to wade through to try to connect like with your spouse, versus if you're always having to then pull out your phone and blocking that connection that way too. So that just spreads that crack across the whole windshield until the whole thing needs to be replaced, somehow. So that meaningful connection piece. Yeah. So that's why I even go into things like simple things like body positioning and eye contact, leaning forward, smiling, even just some things that we're losing, even from a business networking standpoint or with your kids, things that we can just be reminded of. Let me put this into practice.
I'm telling you, the eye contact, I went and grabbed lunch today, and when I picked up my food, I was very intentional because this was fresh on my mind. I said, I'm going to make eye contact with the person at the checkout. It was a little bit uncomfortable. I mean, it was intimate in a way with, the 24-year-old, dude who was giving me my water cup. But it's so interesting. And it reminded me how little I do that, how I actually, you'll do like a glance at the face type of deal, but not an actual like locking eyes. Mm-hmm. That's a really amazing thing. And I think for somebody, people are starved for that. And I actually think that if we do that more, if we put that more into practice, I'm going to work on that more and try not to be weird in the process, but I'm going to try to.
There is a weird way to do there's the not blinking eye contact. That becomes a little strange, but you're totally right. And I've even shifting the word, even from a networking standpoint, I would kind of just cringe at the thought of networking. Yeah. I have to go do my elevator pitch and how amazing I am and how, you got to buy whatever or you got to do whatever. And when I shifted it, I got to stop networking and start relationshiping.
I like
you know,
that.
and I changed it to that word.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do I love these people well that I'm meeting for the first time?
Yeah.
And it's things like eye contact. And it's even something like, you know, I talk about in the book, you know, practice like the first 5 minutes is what I call it.
Yeah.
Like, can you just ask this person great questions? Like, it's like a game. Like, can you think of good quality questions to ask this person?
Right.
You know, and they might leave that conversation. You might not have said a word about yourself. And they're probably thinking, man, I love Joey. Like, he is so awesome. Like, I really connected with him. Like, I really vibed with him. They probably don't even know, like, you didn't say a word.
Yeah.
But they just felt seen, heard. They felt like you cared about them. You know, and like you said, that's so lost, you know. And I think with social media, I don't think we're seeing a bunch of narcissists on social media doing selfies. I think we're seeing a lot of people crying out to be seen and heard and known, who feel so alone. And that's the email I get the most as an author with all the books I've written is, thank you for writing this book. I have felt so alone in this. You know, and that is where this becomes so obviously meaningful. There's so many layers to all of this, where it's so impactful. And it really, if we change that day, if we change those practices, we do change our life in these small, simple ways.
Yeah, it's so true. In the, I'm going to jump, you talking chapter 9 about paying attention to your anxiety and your excitement and connecting it to what you just said about having a conversation with somebody. And I always think the barometer for somebody, or how you relate to somebody, is how you feel, or how you feel about yourself after being with them, or vice versa. And that's the barometer for that type of person. And because most of us, we follow our anxiety online. If we, you know, in the comparison trap on Instagram, oftentimes, not all the time, but then you just have to, if you can pay attention to that anxiety and say, something doesn't feel right here, you know what I mean? And that's a really tough skill, to follow that anxiety, pay attention very deeply. You talk about becoming an expert on yourself. Like, I feel this. So that discovery process, I would love to hear you talk about paying attention to your anxiety and your excitement.
You know, it's another lens that I don't think we want to look through, you know, and we feel like we have to escape from it, or I have to medicate in whatever way. And I'm not saying that medication can't be important for anxiety, but I'm just saying we want to escape from that feeling. Yeah. And for me, I've learned that I need to define my anxiety. Like, that's an important step for me in the process of pulling myself out of a little bit of that spiral. Yeah. And I even remember one moment, I remember when I had this realization, I was feeling anxious, and it was this looming, you know, anxiety is so looming. Yeah. It's just so all encompassing, and it is tough. And so I have to stop myself. And it was this moment where I'm like, why am I anxious? Was it that conversation I just had with my wife? No, that was good. You know, was it the interaction I just had with my daughter? No, that was good. You know, and it was like, it was the post that I just checked, and I didn't feel like I had enough likes. Yeah. And now I'm feeling anxious about that. Yeah. And I didn't even consciously make that connection until I stopped and defined it. And so I even say that anxiety can be a great barometer. It can be a great revealer of some truth in our life. Yes. And it can even reveal, I think it can reveal our values to ourselves sometimes, because maybe anxiety is tied to conviction. So you're feeling anxious about something because you're actually really convicted, you know, and this is not all the time, but sometimes you're being convicted about something. And so you can have a value, let's say, for family. And I have a value for spending quality time with my family. And yet, you know, I feel anxious at work. You know, my work feels anxiety driven to me. And I don't know why. I'm killing it at work. I'm making money. I'm being successful. I'm getting awards. Yeah. I still feel anxious of going to work every day. Well, maybe that was the contradiction of that value of I'm spending 70 hours a week at work, and I barely see my kids before they go to bed. So there's this contradiction being played out. And so I feel anxious all the time. Yeah. So even as we step back and we define those things in our life, it might give us a signpost into some of our values. Yeah. These soul values that are deeply important to our story and the ways that we're wired. And so I think it's just different. So every chapter, I just try to pull out different lenses of, hey, this actually might be really important to look through this lens. We don't have to run away from this lens. It could be a great revealer of truth for our lives.
I like that you said just there at the end is the running away from it. And I can very much relate to that feeling of doing something and then feeling anxious and then having to replay it, or even, but also excited and excited. I feel like I'm excited about something. And then you have to almost go back and retrace your steps and say, oh yeah, that's what I'm excited about. What we do run away from both of those. And so you flee the anxiety. So you miss an opportunity to correct something that needs to be corrected, or you flee from a moment of excitement where you can just like sit in it for a second, you know what I mean? And just, oh, that feels good. Or maybe you can extrapolate more and you can take a lesson and you do this again, or just have that moment where it's paying attention to something good in your day, which probably then continues the cycle. But we flee both of those things, the anxiety and the excitement. One thing I like that you did is the first 9 chapters are fairly introspective. And there's not all the time, but they are fairly introspective. And then chapter 10 goes into paying attention to people, which I think that most of us, and I bet 100% of people listening to the RO podcast would feel this way, is that's our highest ambition. That's our highest intention, is to pay attention to the people that mean most to us. But you got to there's some self-work in there first, right? And so you spend a lot of time building a foundation, which I really, really like. It's almost like the oxygen mask, putting on yourself before you can help others. So let's help get into those. But talk about that, the paying attention to people. You mentioned the love languages, all of that stuff. But once you've gotten this foundation down, how do you then translate that out externally to others?
Yeah, you can you can show love well by showing people your attention, and I think we just become we've almost become so lazy in relationships.
Yeah.
And I think even, a detriment of marriage, and again, the busyness and everything, is I've even noticed that you stop looking at your spouse in the face or again, in the eyes. Because again, you're just going a mile a minute all over the place. You're just circling around each other or on the phone or whatever, just trying to coordinate life.
Yeah.
And so it's so important. So I even talk about simple things like couch time, just sitting on the couch with your spouse, no phones, around, putting them in the box where getting rewarded for that.
There you
go. And then having your kids just see you connecting with each other.
Yeah.
Asking each other questions. Your kids are jumping on and they're involved, and again, I think from a kid's perspective, it's a rooting, grounding experience for them.
Yeah.
And that gives them that peace and that comfort and that confidence. Hey, mom and dad are doing good. Like, I've seen it. They're connecting. And I think a 3-year-old, I think a 4-year-old can feel that, let alone a 16-year-old or 17, 18-year-old.
Yeah.
So it is so crucial to, again, with all our meaningful connections, because that's what's the paradox of our society, is that we're connected globally with everybody around the world instantaneously. And yet so many of us would say that we feel really lonely and isolated. And that's a weird paradox.
It is.
That we're wrestling with right now. Cigna did a study where they were studying something that they said was worse than smoking 10 cigarettes, and what they were calling an epidemic. And this was before COVID, so before the word epidemic was getting thrown around for everything. But they were calling loneliness an epidemic. And they were studying it because they said this is worse for your health than smoking a pack of cigarettes a day, is how lonely people are feeling, especially even younger people.
Yeah.
And again, that's why I focus so much on young adults, but there's that loneliness epidemic. And so it's just a weird paradox.
There's been
taking place.
A recent study that's come out, and it was a lengthy paper on this epidemic of teenage unhappiness and loneliness. And so much of that, and they tie it directly to, hey, it's been, for about the last 12 years, the iPhone was released 15 years ago. This is not us demonizing the iPhone. This is just the fact that, of the potential for these things to form you and how they form you. Is it unhappiness? Is it an all-time high for teenagers? And it's attributed to two things. It's one, certainly it's the comparison and all that stuff that goes into it. 2, it's the escapism. But then 3, it's that we as parents aren't modeling it well. And so then kids certainly, like in development, like children, eye contact is so important, especially infants. And so we're not making eye contact from a very, very young age. And so the foundational stuff that we had for thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, however many years is, millions of years is no longer there. And what's cool about it, what I like about this, what you've done here is you give the weight to the problem, but then you give the hope on what the other side is. So will you give us just a little bit of that? Tell us a little bit about the hope on the other side of paying
Yeah,
attention.
and that's the goal of my book, is not just to give the weight, is to give the encouragement and hope. All my books my goal is to be so hope filled in the book, to encourage and inspire people to change and to really feel like, oh, I really want to do this.
Yeah.
And so the book is made to get messy, first of all, because it's got lots of questions and things to write in, so that you're paying attention and finding truth and revelation and ideas for yourself.
Yeah.
It's not me just saying, hey, here's the truth for my life. It's like, here's the truth for your life that's there waiting for you.
Right.
And then I give these lenses and exercises. So even something like the whole tail end of the book is all about these mindset models that I talk about. And basically, so I have like the entrepreneur mindset model, investigator, farmer, monk, writer. And for me, it was fun ways, almost like you're role playing in a sense. When you think like, I wish I could think like those people think. It's like, well, you can practice that. And you can pull some of the aspects into your life as you form new habits and practices. So even, like the entrepreneurial mindset model, I don't know if you ever, I never envisioned being an entrepreneur. I kind of fell into it, I guess, as a writer and author. But I love how entrepreneurs, they look at their day differently, obviously, but I focused in on how entrepreneurs view their problems. So an entrepreneur, they don't run from their problem. They don't get just frustrated and then just leave it there or complain about it on social media. They get excited about it. It's like, this is a huge problem. Is anybody doing anything about this? Maybe I should solve this problem.
Right. So
a problem can be a pathway to your purpose, to a product, to profit. That's what a problem could be, a really good thing if you can do something about it. So just giving people new lenses and exercises, or like a farmer, how does a farmer look at their day? I grew up with my relatives all in Kansas, all Kansas farmers.
Yeah.
And my great uncle Russell and his farm, he looked at his day very differently.
Right.
He was looking at timing, the seasons, the health of his soil was incredibly important. The consistency of watering, of the elements. So he was looking at his day through different lenses. That then I kind of take people on this journey of, let's look at our day like this.
Yeah.
So just give us helpful exercises to start forming these new habits and practices, so that, again, our day is so much bigger than our distractions.
That's right.
That our purpose is so worth paying attention to. And it is. Like, I'm here to tell everybody, your purpose is so worth paying attention to. Maybe we've just kind of forgotten about it, or we've lost it, or we've just kind of gotten out of that routine. But even focusing the beginning of our day, rooting ourselves into your why, your goals, your purpose, so that your day is so much bigger than all of the other distractions coming at it.
And I love how you say it's a combination of three things. It's art, science, and habit. So listening to the details of your day, I love how you do that. I'll say it again, you do such a good job of illustrating the weight. We need to hear it. It is important. We need to know what's at stake, because if we know what's at stake, then we'll know how hard we need to fight. And then you give the hope behind it, and then you give the tools behind it. I thought it was brilliantly written. I want to close with one question that I'm testing out. This is kind of the beta test.
All right,
you're one
ready.
of the first few. So you're very introspective. So what's the piece of advice that you need to hear today for yourself? For you, what's the piece of advice that you need to hear?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. Yeah. And it's funny asking an author that, it's like I have 5 books where I'm pretty much just writing to myself saying, hey, this is Paul, we got to rethink this stuff in our life, you know? But for me, I'm looking at a book launch right now. Right. Which is always, it's like sending your baby off to college. You've been, working on it for so long now. It's like, and then it's also very visible. It's like, here world, here is my soul.
Right.
Like,
please don't trample it.
Take it. And like, Amazon reviewer, like, thank you for pointing out the defects of my soul. Like, that's fun, So for me, it's a constant reminder. And this is what I'm constantly needing to hear this more, is that my worth doesn't need to be weighted on the perceived outcome of my book,
That's so good.
of my business or whatever it is. And I'm constantly reminding myself, we're so quick to label something a success or failure. And I'm just constantly saying, I got to throw those words out of my vocabulary.
Yeah.
Because really, success and failure only can be looked at through the lens of eternity.
Yeah.
I think about, oftentimes I think about the Apostle Paul in the Bible, New Testament, and he's writing all these letters. The whole New Testament is basically, a lot of it's Paul writing all these letters,
right.
And he's in prison.
Yeah.
And he's writing like, man, I wish I could be there with you. I wish I could, I'm so bummed. And you can hear that. He's lamenting. But it's like that failure or that hardship of him being in prison is why we have half the Bible,
wow.
right?
Wow.
So I think about those things where it's like, Paul, okay, you don't need to be on the teeter-totter of, oh, book sales were great today. Great. I can feel good about myself. I'm worthy, or book sales are bad. I'm terrible. I'm a failure. I can just kind of keep more of an internal, eternal mindset going. So that's something I'm still every day. I mean, it's a battle. I mean, it really is. It's, again, a retraining in a habit.
Yes.
To not go down that wormhole of this failed, I'm a failure.
Yeah.
Where I think we all go too quickly.
I feel that. That's the advice I needed as well. You talk about success and failure. Rudyard Kipling in the poem "If," he says he refers to success and failure as both imposters. So treat them both as the imposters they are, because they really are.
Exactly.
We're gonna do some autograph giveaways of
Yes.
when this launches of the book. I'm really excited about that. Where else should people go? Where are you on socials? Your website? If people want to go learn more about you.
And my website is allgrownup.com, but it's GROAN, all grown, like you're groaning in pain. It's punderful.
Come on.
I've been saying that joke for like 10 years.
You are a father, boy. You do have the dad joke. That's all right. I'll allow it.
I thought it was pretty punny.
Come on. Tripling down.
You got to keep going.
I like it.
If you're there, you just keep digging that hole deeper. But All Grown Up, that's been my home base for over a decade, and people can grab free chapters from all my books on All Grown Up if they want to check out other books or listen to your day. Grab some free chapters, and then Paul Angone is my socials, which Angone Angone. Good luck spelling that, but. But I still am. I'm still on social media. We've been talking about it. It's still, again, that pull of it's but I'm there, and you'll see a lot of videos of me on hikes that I'm doing. Yeah. Because I've scheduled that 45 minutes into my day where I go on a hike, and by the end I'm so fired up. It really is one of the most productive. It's the most productive hour of my day. And so I'm just want to share some idea. I'm so fired up. So if you go on Instagram, most of my videos are me on this hike. So I'm still trying to figure out that healthy balance of this is a great platform to get a message out, but how do I have that healthy relationship with it?
It is. I mean, that's how we connected was on social media.
Exactly.
So, but again, we fully understand the tension there, and I agree with you there. I do. I like that you talk about gardening in there. You may even have some gardening. I appreciate the fact that you don't have Instagram videos in your lavender bubble bath. You do talk about how you like lavender bubble baths. So thank you. Thank you for abstaining.
I felt like that was a little too much. I want to be vulnerable, but I don't want to be that vulnerable.
Right. Yeah, no,
scary vulnerable.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I like the prolonged non-blinking eye contact that I'm going to try out today. So, Paul, you're the best, man. This is incredible. Everybody, please do go pick up a copy of Listen to Your Day. I've read it. I can tell you it is very, very much worth reading. It is very additive. There's stuff you can do immediately. And so it's enriched my life already, Paul. I'm excited to put more of it into practice. So.
I'm excited to keep connecting, Joey. Thanks for all the work you guys are doing.
Thank you, brother.